I'll be back with the whole fire department.
Get off my plane.
One of the classic wonders. The most famous is never get involved in a land war in Asia, but only slightly less well known is this. Never go in against a Sicilian when death is on the line.
Starting this show with a bang and ending it probably with a whimper. But hey, how are you? Mark here. I am the Cinemaniac. You are undoubtedly a Cinemaniac if you're watching it. Thus, the title of this show, even though it's just one of me, still makes sense when I say we are the titular Cinemaniacs. Only have but a few films to discuss today. It was there were more than a few that were released. Much as I said, I only thought one was coming out last week. It turned out that there were several, but it also turned out that I, honestly, between you and me, felt like doing something other than going to the movies this weekend. So I will talk about two new things that I saw, and the other two that came out, I will talk about when I can, and I will certainly see as many as I can next week, and we'll continue this charade for as long as it lasts. First up is a film that is based on a children's cartoon from Nickelodeon from a decade or two. Time flies these days. Could be 20 years, could be 2 years. I really don't know. Don't really particularly care. Cartoon that some of you may or may not know, aimed at very, very little kids. Now we have a live-action theatrical feature film based at, like all feature films, are all ages. This is a tale of a young girl who loves going through the jungle and finding things and seeking out knowledge and artifacts and all kinds of wonderful adventures. And they call her, alliteratively, rhymingly, Dora the Explorer. But the movie is called Dora and the Lost City of Gold. Rated. It's PG. And it's funny, you know, I go to the movies now. I don't have to. Whatever it's rated doesn't matter to me. I just walk in, and it's fun for me, because this is the kind of things that amuse me while I'm driving many hours, is watch a movie and then try to figure out what it was rated afterwards, and then go back and check. This was a PG film. Nothing offensive in this film. I was not thrilled at the look of the trailer for this movie. I never watched the cartoon because it was a cartoon for children when I wasn't a child. Not that that keeps me from watching cartoons. And a movie based on that, I'm like, I really don't care. That trailer made the movie look pretty dumb, and it had the requisite, you know, gross out or rectal humor, which I find rather just lame. And so I went to this film. Of the three films that were released this weekend, I'll tell you the other two that I didn't see. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark I did not see, and The Kitchen I also did not see. This was the one I thought I was the least interested in seeing, but the timing worked out. And not too far into this movie, I found myself chuckling. And then I found myself laughing and smiling quite a bit during this movie. And shockingly, I really liked Dora and the Lost City of Gold. It's like a kid Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like like anything these days. It's like a lot of movies you've seen before. I cannot say how close it is to the cartoon at all because I never saw it. I do feel like there are enough odes to the cartoon and winks to the cartoon that if you were somebody who grew up watching this or were forced to watch it with your child, you may find it funny. It didn't really... It's not one of those things that sort of trashes the original in order to, you know, be new and hip. It makes nods and winks to the old show, and people kind of give her some sideways glances because the character of Dora in this is so childlike. I think she's supposed to be 16 in the body of the film. She's so childlike, and she's so innocent and so positive and into, you know, intelligence and learning things that everybody else gives her a sideways glance. But ultimately, it is shown to be those skills that she possesses that get her and her friends out of all of these scrapes that they're in. It's very much an adventure movie. It's a comedy. There's some song and dance in it, which I thought was rather pleasant. This is directed by the man who gave us Flight of the Conchords, the TV show, and the two newest Muppet films, both of which I liked quite a bit. So it has that same sense of lightness and fun to it. I think it's probably fine for all ages. I mean, I was the lone creepy dude sitting by himself in the children's film. again, and I had a great time. And I think, you know, this is one of those where we always used to talk about in this show, children's films versus family films. I always felt like children's films were films that really only kids would enjoy and the parents had to suffer through. And family films are films where there's something for everybody in it. And I would call this more of a family film. Like, it was weird to tell everybody that I saw this Dora movie and really liked it, but I would happily see more Dora movies. I'd like to see her exploring multiple corners of the earth and getting involved with actual, you know, ancient culture and history and weaving maybe a little intelligence and learning into these movies without being heavy-handed. The most recognizable people in the film, I think, are those who play Dora's parents. You have Michael Pena. Michael Pena? Yeah, Michael Pena and Eva Longoria. They're not in a tremendous amount. They're in a little at the beginning, a little at the end, but they're good and funny. It leans a little bit more toward Gee, Aren't Men Stupid as far as the father character goes, but you know, I guess that's to be expected for the most part in films these days. I don't know. I don't have a lot to say, but I have a lot of time to cover. So what else about Dora? It was very clever in some of the how she got out of certain scrapes. They had some good action choreography, actually, funny enough, in a children's film. And there's a monkey in it. And if you know me, you put a monkey in a film, interest level shoots through the roof. If it's an actual monkey, hilarity ensues. Monkey doesn't have to do anything. Monkey can just sit there and look. If the monkey is wearing people clothes, even better. This was a CGI monkey. Now, again, I didn't watch the original cartoon, so it may be a very good representation of what the monkey on the show looked like. There's a CGI monkey and a CGI fox, and I think that's it as far as the CGI characters go. It looks totally fake. It's totally silly. The fact that it was a monkey represented in the film meant a lot to me, but it wasn't as much as if they'd used an actual chimp. But I can't tell you enough how much of a surprise Dora and the Lost City of Gold was. I would probably sit through this again. I wouldn't say I would buy it, but if this was at a drive-in with something else I wanted to see, I would certainly sit through Dora again. So, speaking of family films, this film involves a family. This film involves a family quite literally torn asunder. We have the new film from the director of The Babadook, which was a surprise indie horror hit from Australia a couple of years ago. This time it's not so much a horror film as a revenge film about a woman whose family is destroyed by callous British soldiers in colonial Australia who takes it upon herself to seek bloody revenge on those rapscallions in a film entitled The Nightingale. This is a film that is in relatively limited release right now. This is IFC film, so that sort of puts it into the art house genre, art house world. I saw this at the Alamo Drafthouse in Yonkers last night, kind of on a whim. I really didn't know anything about this other than it's from the director of The Babadook and that it's, well, if it's from the director of a really well-known horror movie, you're going to expect that this is probably some sort of thriller or horror film or something like that. So totally blind, had no idea what was going to happen until it started happening in front of me. So the story, as I started to say, it doesn't explain this, and I was of two minds. It took me a while to figure out what everybody's relationship was in this film and where they were and when they were and why things were overall the way they were, but then I figured it out, and in a way I appreciated not having that crawl at the beginning of the film, but other people might be a little confused by it. This is set in colonial Australia. So you know Australia was a prison colony initially where the British sent their prisoners from Europe or the British Isles to go and work off their, you know, their debt to society in Australia. This is part of that. So you have British soldiers, you have the prisoners working on these work farms, and then you have the indigenous people, my brain is blanking, but the indigenous people of Australia who like a lot of indigenous people, when the British came along, they get kind of pushed out of their own country and off into a corner somewhere. So there's a lot of that social strife between the lower classes who are prisoners and the upper classes who are soldiers, who can pretty much do what they want, and the indigenous people who are just trying to survive in a land where they've been, you know, wiped out and made more or less, you know, slave labor. So that's the context for this. But the story is you have this woman who is working in one of these working encampments, mistreated a lot by the British soldiers, one captain in particular, and then a really heinous act occurs that leaves her for dead with her dead family, and then she survives and goes on the hunt for these guys across the wilderness of Australia with this indigenous guide. And it's so it's more of a thriller. I wouldn't call this a horror movie. It has horrifying elements. The heinous act that starts the film in motion. I always say I like revenge movies. Because I like to see people get what's coming to them. Every revenge movie needs to have something so repulsive and so reprehensible as the act that initiates the story that you as an audience member needs to just totally be on the side of the person who's been wronged, and you just want to see them dismantle the bad person, or preferably bad people, because then you get to see it happen a whole bunch of times. So in this film, it is only three, sadly, who are the offensive people, and our heroine and her guide brave the elements to go across this ragged Australian wilderness to find these people. And the question is, you know, does she find them? Does she survive the journey to find them? Does she survive the act of revenge? And, you know, as my favorite tagline of all time for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre went, who will survive and what will be left of them? It's kind of up in the air a lot while you watch the movie. You don't know if this is going to be a happy ending. Well, it's not going to be happy no matter what, but you don't know if she's going to achieve her goal or not. Performances in this film are fine. It's mostly people you've never seen before. Only one actor, the lead actor who played the evil captain, is well, actually he and his sidekick I had seen before. The sidekick actually was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as Charles Manson, funny enough. So this very different roles here. I felt the film was it was interesting to watch, but it felt too long to me. This was 136 minutes, and I felt in the end that it could have easily lost 40 minutes of that. It just seemed to lose its way and meander a bit here and there, and it was a little repetitive in some ways. Certainly brutal. Certainly, as I said, the heinous act was really hard to watch. I'm not a guy I don't know how I feel about the whole trigger warning thing, but this is a film where I think if you had a hard time with certain content, this would really be a problem for you. I'm not going to use that other problem type word because that annoys me too. But anyway, I was watching this film and I felt myself being very tense, and I wanted to leap into the screen and take these guys apart as they were doing this thing. So it is really, really hard to get through, but it's up front in the film, and then the rest of the film, that memory of that act motivates her and you to want to see these guys get what's coming to them. Certainly, really nice use of the Australian wilderness. Australia has so much to offer landscape-wise. A lot of times you think Australia and you think, you know, kangaroos and desert and the ocean and the reefs and all that, and this doesn't look anything like that. This is the rugged mountains and tundra and wilderness, and a place that's really hard to get from point A to point B in those days where there are no roads for the most part. It's just mountains and craggy rocks and wagons with wooden wheels and horses. Film presented interestingly to me in 4:3, which means square. So, you know, the TV you're probably watching this on is 16:9. It's, you know, horizontally oriented. 4:3 was, you know, old TV shows, old movies in the 40s, just square. Interesting choice to me to shoot it that way. I'm not quite sure why. I had seen a trailer before this film for a new film with Willem Dafoe and Robert Pattinson from the director of The Witch, or The Vavitch, which is about two lighthouse keepers in the olden days, and that's black and white in 4:3, and it seems odd. More often than not, it's an artistic choice. I'm never somebody who will poo-poo the artistic choice of somebody else, but more often when I see somebody shooting 4:3, I just think they're trying to be difficult. I don't know, it seems weird in this day and age, but at any rate, this film was 4:3. Didn't really bother me after a while. At first I noticed it and I wondered if at any point it was going to expand, and it never did, but it was fine. They made good use of the frame. It's not like you're watching an old pan and scan videotape of a widescreen movie or something. So who is this film for, The Nightingale? It's an art house film, so it's for art house audiences. I don't know if Babadook fans are going to get off on this thinking it's another kind of weirdo horror movie, because it really isn't. It's not really a horror movie. It's much more a survival tale, and a tale of, you know, just white-hot determination to achieve a goal, however impossible it might be, and however much the odds are stacked against you as, you know, whoever you are in this day and age, that day and age. So anyway, The Nightingale is out there. I think it's going to be a little difficult to see. I think in larger markets, larger cities, it'll be there. Locally, where we are in Keene, it's the kind of thing that the Colonial might get. But I would say, be warned. Pay attention to what is under or next to the R when they describe why something is rated, what it's rated, because the content in this is really strong in those moments. And not as much toward the end. It's funny. It sort of felt like a mix to me, if this means anything to you, of like I Spit on Your Grave and Rolling Thunder. Funny enough. So, and there's nothing funny about this movie either. Occasional amusement, but otherwise it's just really, really brutal. And maybe 40 minutes too long. So that's all that I saw in the theater this weekend. I apologize. I actually saw a bunch of other stuff in the theater on a big screen, but I will tell you about that if we have time to kill at the end of the show. I do want to point out that we are attempting to do this show on Facebook Live, although I'm told that it's being a little spotty. So it may be that the trailers and movie clips that we use up in the show are copyright flagging this. So you may see this show on Facebook minus the trailers and everything later, and you might not be seeing it live. We may not even do Facebook Live anymore. I don't know. Anyway, we have a Facebook page, and I use that to promote the show and interesting movie screenings that are going on, and video releases, and sales, and articles, and anything that kind of tickles my fancy that I think anybody who watches this show or has a similar mental capacity or defect to me might be interested in. So Facebook is there for you. So we're going to move on now to that which you can watch on the home video streaming service, cable service, video disc, video, Blipvert video service platform of your choice. Damn few to talk about here too. So first up, we have the latest and last, it made money, so nowhere, it's the last episode in the long-running, decade-long series of Avengers movies. The last film we had, Avengers Infinity War, I'm not going to tell you what happened in that, in case you haven't seen that movie before. This trailer is probably going to ruin that movie for you. So if you haven't seen the last couple of Avengers movies and want to, just kind of like look away from this trailer, turn down the volume maybe when we play it. Or if you're watching on YouTube, the trailer will be cut out anyway, so it doesn't matter. So all the Avengers are back once again to deal with the aftermath of what happened in Infinity War and somehow move forward and defeat the remaining evil of Thanos, the big finger-clicking bad guy from the previous film, in a film entitled appropriately, but probably not honestly, Avengers Endgame. That film is incendiary. So you can't just pop this disc in. You can't just watch this movie. I mean, you can. You might not understand what's going on. This is a film that, it's kind of cool, it's rewarding. They say it's like a comic book. It's like a comic book when comic books were just crossing over back and forth, and it's like you'd read a panel and they'd refer to something and they'd say, see issue 6 of Iron Fist, and you'd have to go and figure out what that was. So this film, Avengers Endgame, is the culmination of all of the Avengers and Avengers-related movies that have happened over the last decade. And there's a series of films... I'm telling you, there's a series of films called The Avengers, which you have all the... Does anybody not know? Okay, Grandma. So there are individual superhero movies that have been Marvel films that have all come together. You get 3 or 4 that all have some kind of a thread that ties them together, and they come to an Avengers movie that sort of wraps up all those stories, and then we rest, and there's individual superhero movies, and you keep getting that. But all the Avengers movies also have an ongoing thread to a degree. Or, a couple movies ago, the people at Marvel decided to look at everything they've done so far and find a way to connect them all to make it look like that was always part of their plan, and now we have the last couple Avengers movies that culminate all those other stories. At any rate, this is a culmination, don't you know? It's an endgame, as it were. So we have the remaining Avengers who are left after the events of the previous film dealing with a different world, a very different world than they've dealt with before, and trying to go off and find the bad guy who did this and undo that somehow through insane time travel, shape-shifting, every kind of magic and power that they have at their disposal to sort of get the world back to the way it was. So, like any Avengers movie, you're juggling a lot of characters, you're juggling a lot of like little storylines, you're picking up a lot of references to the previous films. So I'm not saying you should watch the other 13 or however many Marvel films led up to this, but watching a couple probably helps. Absolutely watching the one that came before this helps. Watching Infinity War. Infinity War and Endgame are really 2 halves of one big movie. It's certainly long, like these Marvel movies and most movies tend to be, but I was never bored with Endgame. It starts off slow and it's very somber. It's very funereal. It's a very sad, dark Avengers movie for the most part. There's certainly laughs in this. There always are in these movies, and there are always moments of fun and stand up and cheer and quirky, fun surprises, and characters who show up that you don't expect, and the Stan Lee cameo that we really won't be getting too many more of, and it's just a heck of a lot of fun. And they utilize everybody really well. Most of these Avengers movies, there are a couple here and there where I felt like a certain character sort of could have not been there for how little you saw them, but because there were fewer characters to deal with in this movie, they dealt with them very well. A tremendous amount of emotion in this film, very powerful emotional scenes here and there throughout. It certainly seems to indicate the end of certain characters appearing in these movies. They said this was the end of this cycle. So we're certainly still going to get Marvel movies. There's too much money being made for us to not see more Marvel movies, but there are some characters we probably won't see again, or we won't see the same actors playing those characters again. It may be the way we've seen in comic books where, you know, several people have been Batman over the years in the comics. It's not just Bruce Wayne. We may start seeing that in these Avengers movies, solo films. If a couple of them fail financially, you won't see many more of that, but I think you'll see some of these. So Infinity War / Endgame. Endgame I thought was quite good. It handled it really well. It's got some good action sequences in it. It's got some really fun, fantastical elements. It is a bit of a downer, be prepared for that, but hot on the heels of that, we had Spider-Man Far From Home, which I thought was a blast. Certainly don't watch that one before you see this one, or something pretty huge will be given away. Don't even watch the trailer for Far From Home if you haven't seen Endgame and want to. But I've been really impressed with the Marvel movies. I used to say I felt bad for these kids today because they didn't have a film series like I did growing up. When I was growing up, I had Indiana Jones, and I had Star Wars, and I had the Pink Panther movies, and the Herbie movies, and so many of these film series that went on over a span of time. And then we got the Avengers movies, and we got the Harry Potter movies, so in the Hunger Games. So kids today do have these film series that they can in some ways kind of grow up with, which is pretty cool. So Avengers, you know, there was all this talk of this being the end. It's just the end in some ways. They're still making them. This Marvel still has a ridiculous slate of films coming out over the next few years, almost seemingly one a month. DC is still ridiculously trying to play catch up and do the same thing. They're pretty hit and miss. I would say more miss than hit, but I don't think we're going to see the end of superhero movies anytime soon. And frankly, some people I know are they're tired of the superhero movies. I don't mind. It's a little tiresome when that's all you can see in the theater, like a few weeks ago where I was trying to go see something new and it was just the same 5 superhero movies and Disney films that have been playing for a month. That was kind of a downer, but otherwise I enjoyed these. I've enjoyed far more of these than I haven't enjoyed, and I know there are several more really being made now and in the pipeline. So I think some of the people that you've known and loved as Avengers are going to continue. My guess is that we'll probably have a movie or two without some of these characters, and you may get a cameo or something from actors who don't want to be pigeonholed as, say, Captain America forever. So that is all I have to say and kill time with about Avengers Endgame. We have one more film officially that I prepared for us to talk about today. That is the newest film by Jean Imot, who is the director of a lot of Asian. He does Asian fantasy, he does Asian period pieces, he does heavy drama. He does it all quite well. He started off with period pieces that were just dramas, things like Raise the Red Lantern and films of that nature. And he did a movie called Hero. He may have done something before Hero, but in this genre. He did a movie called Hero with a pretty big all-star cast. Jet Li, Tony Leung, Maggie Chung, and some others. And it was an amazing, gorgeous movie that Miramax picked up and did pretty well in the theater. And it was beautiful period piece, fantasy, martial arts, swordplay, wushu, all that stuff. And since then, he's been sort of doing a lot more in the way of martial arts period pieces. This is the latest film. I saw this in the theater whenever it came out a few months ago. It's just hitting video tomorrow. This is the tale of, it's really complicated. So let's let the trailer do the talking if you're watching this on TV. It is the film with palace intrigue and backstabbing, literally, and martial arts, and it's done in a very interesting visual style, and it is called Shadow. Pretty, ain't it? So this is a film that, again, is set in the old days, feudal China, old China, and it is gorgeous. I love period pieces, Chinese period pieces, just because every element of it is so intricately and delicately crafted, whether it's the costumes, the hair, the makeup, the environments, the indoors, the outdoors, all of it. So you could watch this movie with the sound off and it would still be a rewarding experience. I can't recount to you all of the plot details because they were complex. It was a film that while I was watching it, I was trying to figure out what was going on, and eventually it clicked in and I really got into it. So it's basically, it's a power struggle. There's a royal kingdom. There is somebody who is trying to reclaim a throne. There are people on the inside who are working with people on the outside to try to overthrow the king. There's use of a double, somebody who looks like somebody else or maybe has been replacing somebody else all this time. I don't want to say too much because it's complex and it's really cool as these things are revealed to you and you realize what's going on. Visual style. So it's shot amazingly. Like it's it looks really good. Like, it looked amazing on the big screen, and if you're somebody who has a nice giant razor-sharp TV, you're going to want to just drink this movie. So it is predominantly black and white, thus the shadow. It is predominantly black and white, but skin tones are in color, and blood is in color. So when somebody is cut with a sword or stabbed or otherwise punctured, shall we say, the blood seems all that much more vibrant because it's one of the few things that are in color. I wasn't quite sure how I would feel about that style. I had seen the previews, and it seemed like kind of a gimmick to me, and I thought it might just look not well done, almost like a colorized film. But it wasn't. I almost kind of forgot that the film was being presented that way until you would see a scene where there was color contrasted against black and white, and it would really stand out to you. Again, on a big screen, it does much more so. All the performances are outstanding in this. The sword play, the martial arts are really well done. I always said that 90s Hong Kong cinema to me set the standard for what all cinematic action should be, how it should be presented visually, and how exciting it should be, and how dangerous it should be. And very little to me lives up to that these days, but swordplay films, and especially these more art house swordplay films, tend to do it the way I think it should be done, which is, let me see what's going on. And they do. They're looking at the beauty of it more often, so they're not going to shake the camera and put the camera too close and edit too much. They're going to put it in slow motion. They're going to pull that camera back and let you enjoy it. And I really did in this. And part of it, too, in this film, part of the excitement isn't just the action. It's not just fisticuffs and people flying through the air and cutting an egg in half with the side of their hand and all that kind of stuff. It's the strategy. It's like bandits and guerrillas and military, not like guerrillas, but, guerrillas, and military cunning and planning. And you see all these people show up to attack the enemy, and you don't know what their plan is ahead of time. And as you see it unfold, it just puts for me at least, it put a big smile on my face because it was just so clever and so cool. And these kind of weapons that may or may not be based on reality, but are just so clever that I'd never seen anything like that before. And that's something that, to me, that's what I get off on in the theater now. Not going to make the other joke. It is stuff that I've never seen before. And if you've seen as many movies as I have and as constantly as I do, it's unusual to see something new in a film. And you kind of sometimes think, I'm not going to see anything new anymore. I'm going to see the same crap regurgitated. And if this was regurgitated crap, it was regurgitated crap I'd never seen before. So I would say if you like this film, if this film looks interesting to you, you might also know Zhao Yimou. It's funny, I watched something with him once, or people were discussing him, and Chinese names are in a different order than American names. Family name first, first name second. Sometimes when English-speaking people write these names out, they swap it so that it's in our order. So when I heard him being referred to, it's Zhao Yimou, and it's Yimou is his first name, Zhao is the first name, is the family name. I kept thinking they were talking about some Italian guy. Hey, Johnny Moe. Johnny Moe's coming around. Johnny Moe's making a movie again. Then I read it and I realized I was very wrong. So if you like Zhao Yimou's work, or this looks good to you, I would highly recommend Hero. It's not that hard to find. Miramax put it out back a decade or two ago, probably two. So it was out on DVD and Blu-ray, and it's been since re-released on Blu-ray. It is an amazingly gorgeous movie. This is one of those movies that the DVD or the Blu-ray would be like the demo disc if you want to show your friend how good your TV can look. Blazing color, amazing, beautiful, really good battle scenes and martial arts scenes and romance and all that stuff. He also did House of Flying Daggers, which had an even bigger release in this country. I think Fox put that out at the time. And there may be another one that that's slipping my memory. The man has consistently worked since the 80s, so that if you like his body of work, there's so much to choose from. So that's all I had prepared to talk about today. I see myself with 21 minutes, and I hate to leave you hanging without hearing me talk for close to a full hour. So I'm going to wing it and babble on about a few more things. We do have, by the way, an email address, if you're into that sort of thing, movies@cheshiretv.org. That comes right to me. So the insults go right to me. They don't filter through anybody. And that's sort of, if you have a question, a comment, whatever, if you kind of half remember a movie you saw long ago and you only remember that it had the guy with the chicken on his head, and do I know what it is? I might not. I could always share that to the Facebook page and use the knowledge base of the 3 people who look at us on Facebook and see if they've heard of it, or anything. That's what that's for. And there's the Facebook page and the email address, and it all pretty much comes here. So that's for that. So what did I do this weekend, you're asking? Why did this bum who makes me invest an hour every week into watching his ramblings on TV not actually see all the movies that came up in the theater? Well, partly it's because I didn't care, but partly was because I was at the Mahoning Drive-In Theater where I spend my weekends in Lehighton, Pennsylvania. It was our Universal Monster Mash weekend. We've done this, I think this is the third year we've done this, and we play 2 nights, Friday and Saturday night, 2 classic Universal monster movies. On film, 35mm, black and white prints, and it's a hell of a good time. And we ran, let's see if I can remember, we ran Revenge of the Creature, which was the second creature from the Black Lagoon movie, and The Mummy's Hand, which is the Mummy sequel to the Karloff film, and that was Friday night. And then Saturday night was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman and House of Dracula. In addition to that, we work with film studios and collectors. And film studios will give us the prints for their titles that we license and rent from them. And collectors will give us the fun stuff that goes around that. Collectors will give us, and from our own collection, and from actually my collection, original movie previews from the past 50 or 60 years. Or this weekend we had vintage cartoons each night. We had Musical Maestro, the Tex Avery cartoon. We had a Three Stooges short each night, one of which was an actual print from the 40s. So as our friend Ernie here has pointed out, that print that I was able to hold in my hand existed when Shemp was still alive. And then a lot of vintage movie trailers that were thematically appropriate to Universal Monsters or Universal horror type movies from the 30s through the 70s. And then we also ran an original Flash Gordon Conquers the Universe movie serial chapter. So it was a really robust night of programming each night. You know, you figure these movies are only about an hour a piece, roughly, because they were originally designed to be part of a double feature. Back in the old days when you'd pay your 25 cents and you would get a newsreel, a cartoon, a comedy short, trailers, on and on and on in 2 movies. They weren't trying to give you 8 hours of entertainment. Those movies were like 60 to 70 minutes long. If you watch a lot of the things we air on Cheshire TV at noontime, a lot of those old cowboy movies are barely an hour, and that's because they were intended to be paired up. So when going into a weekend where we only have 2 movies and they're roughly an hour, we want to pad that out so it's not, you're not driving from New Orleans like a guy did this weekend to pay, you know, your $10 per night and get 2 hours of entertainment. So we kind of beefed it up. And also we decorate the snack bar. We have a sizable snack bar. The drive-in is built in 1948, opened in 49, and everything is vintage to the structure. The walls have not been knocked down or anything. So we had displays of coffins and Dracula and the Mummy, and we had Frankenstein equipment that went outside. Did you miss that? And we had people dressed up as Wolfman, Frankenstein, wandering the grounds, and it was a monster mash. It was a huge party, and it was a heck of a good time. We had people come from, as I said, New Orleans, all over the East Coast. We had somebody come from Canada, apparently, and it was a really good time, and it was really cool to see people aged, you always say 8 to 80, but it kind of was. Little kids to senior citizens all coming together and enjoying these movies that are 70 years old. I mean, these are not new films, and I was really shocked. There were certain people, I work the register in the cash register in the snack bar, so I see everybody who comes through there at least. And some people I looked at, I'm like, really? You like these movies? I mean, it's really great, but I was really surprised. I mean, when I seeing, you know, what looked to me like high school jock types coming to see, you know, Lon Chaney Jr., that's really cool. And even if they just came for the festivities and the fun, that's really cool. So I had a great time with that. It was great seeing these movies again. These are movies that I grew up watching on, if you're from the area that we generally tape in here, the Boston area, New England, Channel 56, Creature Double Feature was huge for me as a kid. That was how I found out about monster movies. That's how I saw the Universal films and the Hammer films and the Amicus films and the AIP movies and all of that between 56 and 38. So being able to see these movies that I saw as a little kid with no dream I would ever see them on the big screen, at a big screen at the drive-in. What we have is, we believe, the largest outdoor screen on the East Coast, so just sky high and giant. To see these movies on prints that looked really good was really fantastic. Revenge of the Creature, first sequel of 2 to Creature from the Black Lagoon, done in the mid to late 50s. Features Clint Eastwood in a tiny role back when he was a Universal contract player, just as a scientist who has sort of a want kind of moment in a lab. John Agar is in the film, star of many of these kind of movies, and he's a scientist who's working with female scientists who's trying to study the creature. They capture the creature, they take him out of the Black Lagoon, and they put him basically like in SeaWorld. They put him on display for everybody to see. A little bit of a King Kong aspect there, right down to the chains. And they're trying to study him to figure out what makes him tick, and, you know, what is this thing? Is he man? Is he fish? Is he where does he fall in the evolutionary line? And Creature not a big fan of that. Creature Creature wants to be free. So, and Creature likes the ladies too. So it is this interesting tale of the creature sort of falling for the female scientist and wanting to go off and make little fish babies with her and wanting to get back to the lagoon. And you kind of side with the creature for the most part. Creature is pretty scary in this film too. In both films, I think he's sort of ferocious and mysterious, and I really like that. This was originally in 3D. We did not screen it that way. There's no real good way to do that at a drive-in. You can do the red-blue 3D, but it honestly doesn't really work very well. It doesn't really work. It was just a way of sort of making 3D work with one projector cheaply, but to me, it's not worth it if you see it that way. We ran it flat, and it got a really good reaction. A lot of really big Creature from the Black Lagoon fans out there. A lot of people with Revenge of the Creature t-shirts that I saw the other day, which was really fun. Little kids in Creature from the Black Lagoon masks. It's really quite wonderful. So that was fun to see again. Mummy's Hand was interesting. Like a lot of the Mummy movies, especially like the first Mummy movie, talking about the 30s, black and white Mummy movies, surprisingly light on the whole mummy aspect of the film. A lot of it is people scheming to do things and bad guys and curses and Tana leaves and all this other stuff, and then the mummy shows up and, you know, a couple times and gets people. Interesting one, I don't have, I'm just riffing here, so I don't have anything to look at. I had always thought that the Mummy was always played by somebody sort of known in the Universal stable. You had Karloff playing the Mummy in the original film, and you had Lon Chaney Jr. in at least one of the other movies. This one was somebody I didn't recognize, but it didn't matter because he's all covered in bandages and mud and mummy makeup. But it was fun. It was a fun, just 30s Universal Studio movie, maybe 40s, I could be wrong. But it wasn't, the Mummy movies tend to be a little slow. They move at about the pace the Mummy does for the most part. Until Universal brought it back with Brendan Fraser and they became these crazy CGI action spectacles that were sort of Raiders of the Lost Ark riffs. The original Mummy movies are relatively slow. The first couple are set in Egypt, and I know at least one moves that action to the southern US, which is kind of a cool vibe. So didn't love The Mummy's Hand, but it's out there for you. It's out there on DVD and Blu-ray if you're interested. All of these are. Second night we had the Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which I actually ran here. If you know the other show I used to do called Saturday Fright Special, we used to do a live show called The Spooktacular at the Colonial Theater here in town, and it would be a vintage 35mm monster movie and prize giveaways and a little bit of a stage show and all kinds of crazy stuff. And we ran. That was the one Universal monster movie we ever ran, I believe, was Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So that falls, it's interesting because it's a crossover. It was the first of the crossover monster movies for Universal. Comes after Frankenstein, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, which, funny enough, a comedy spoof of the movies from a decade earlier is what reinvigorated the whole horror line for Universal. So you have the Wolfman being awakened in somewhere in the neighborhood of where the Frankenstein monster has been frozen in ice after the last movie. Wolfman is Lon Chaney Jr. As you know, Frankenstein in this film is Bela Lugosi, which is interesting because Bela Lugosi plays, some of those guys did multiples. You know, Lon Chaney Jr. was the Mummy once. He was he the Frankenstein monster once? I think he might have been. And he was also, played Dracula's son and the Wolfman, so he did multiple duties on that. Bela Lugosi as the monster. Originally it was shot to have the monster talk. They didn't think it worked with basically Dracula's voice coming out of the Frankenstein monster, so that all got cut out, so that's why he's always in this film, unlike the previous ones where he could speak a little bit. And also the monster was supposed to be blind in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and they decided to cut that element out of the film, so that's why he's always doing this in the film, is he's feeling his way around. They never really explain that in there. What's also interesting to me about Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is when you watch it, there are a lot of scenes where it's clearly a stunt double or a double. It's not Lugosi. And it's not just at a distance. Like the first time you see him behind ice, like a sheet of ice when Larry Talbot discovers him, it's clearly not Bela Lugosi. And I always thought that was bizarre. Like, maybe if you're watching it on TV and the rabbit ears aren't exactly adjusted and you're across the room on a small screen, yeah, you wouldn't know. But this movie was intended to be on a giant screen. I mean, they weren't even trying to fool anybody. I always thought that was really odd. The film is fun. It is all the trappings of a Frankenstein movie and all the trappings of a Wolfman movie. Maria Ouspenskaya is back again as the old gypsy woman who, you know, shakes a finger and says things are not going to go well. And it's what's funny to me, always has been, is Frankenstein doesn't really meet the Wolfman until the last few minutes of the movie. And the big monster battle that all the posters and trailers would proclaim and sell this movie on, it's really like a minute and a half, and then the words of the end come up. It's really right at the very end of the movie, and then all hell breaks loose, and the end, and you're just like, well, that was great, but it just, they weren't really, but that's what that is. And then House of Dracula is interesting. These were the last, I believe, the last couple of the classic Universal monster movies. You had the house movies, which were, they called them monster rallies. They were films where you had multiple monsters in them, where it would be the mad scientist, the hunchback, the wolfman, Dracula, the vampire, not the vampire, the Frankenstein monster. It would be squeezing as many of these into one story as you could. These had John Carradine as Dracula, so it's a very different Dracula. It's not John Carradine doing a Bela Lugosi impersonation. It's John Carradine being a very cultured European gentleman in a top hat with a little mustache and a cape and a cane. Pretty cool bat transformations where he just sort of brings the cape up and it turns them into a cartoon, and then it uses animation as a bridge between the giant rubber bat and John Carradine. I was honestly a little sleepy during House of Dracula, so I'm a little spotty on it. I know it has a nurse who's a hunchback. That's something you don't see every day. It has Glenn Strange as the Frankenstein monster, though my recollection of this film is that he's in it very, very little. It's really more House of Dracula. It's very much more a Dracula film where Dracula is working with this mad scientist to try to undo his vampirism through blood transfusions or voodoo or shock therapy or whatever. He's trying to, much like Barnabas on Dark Shadows, not coincidentally, trying to get rid of the vampirism and be a person who can walk around during the day and not have that curse anymore. Doesn't go particularly well. Don't want to give it away, but it doesn't really work out for old Drac in this film. So those were the films we ran and all the extra stuff. It was immense fun to do this. It was fun for me to be able to get out from the snack bar and actually watch the movies for a change, because on a busy night I usually can't. And it was great to hear people applauding the end of the films. It was great to hear people laughing out loud at Three Stooges comedies, because I'm a huge Stooges fan, and they are funnier on the big screen. You see a lot more, dare I say, subtlety in the Stooge films on the big screen. And hearing people applaud a Tex Avery cartoon and laugh at it, and just it was a really good crowd. It's a really wonderful weekend. So we're going to do it again next year, as long as there are people who show up for this and Universal films available, and there's still a lot more we haven't run yet. We've done all the big classics, we've done all the first chapters in all these films, but there's still a lot more entries in all of these series. We might always bring some back for people who never saw them the first time, and we certainly can move into the 1950s Deadly Mantis, the Mole People, Monster on Campus, Monolith Monsters. I mean, Universal put out a lot of monster movies beyond the ones that were the big 3 or 4 of their iconic characters. I'm not just selling the Mahoning here. I'm just telling you about what I do on the weekend. No calls to action. This weekend, it's Woodstock at the Drive-In. It is the actual anniversary, 50th anniversary of the Woodstock concert in New York that everybody knows and loves. And what we're doing is we're running the director's cut of the Woodstock film, on film, and we're having bands play all day. So we're sort of having our own little music festival, and at the end of the night on Friday and Saturday, on the actual, I believe, if not the actual dates, it's only off by one day. The dates that this thing happened, only a couple hours from the theater, actually. The Woodstock site and museum, what do they call it, the Bethel Woods Center for the Arts, is only 2.5 hours from where we are in Lehighton. So people could feasibly do both of those things that weekend. Now that the official Woodstock 50th anniversary concert has collapsed in upon itself, that was going to happen, if you need a all-day concert and Woodstock movie at night, hey. So we're running Woodstock. We're having bands from about 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock each night, different bands each night, and then running the Woodstock Director's Cut, which is, I'm going to guess, about 3 hours. I know the original movie was pretty darn long, and the Director's Cuts are rarely shorter than the theatrical cuts. And then we have something I can't talk about, but I am insanely excited that we were able to do as an unannounced co-feature. So there's going to be the Woodstock movie and then something else playing that is from right around the same time as the release of the Woodstock movie. Something that means a lot to me personally, something I never thought I would get to see, something that I'm still slack-jawed that we were able to get our hands on. So that's just information for anybody who's interested. That's the kind of stuff we do down there. We have the Camp Blood event coming up, which is 2 nights of 80s slasher movies, which we always do. Usually they're camping themed, so it's like Friday the 13th and The Burning and Just Before Dawn and stuff like that. We always have somebody related to one or more of the films there to sign autographs and shake hands and say hello. This year it's Jill Sholin, who was in God, she was in a lot of stuff. She was in Friday the 13th, the Jason Goes to Hell. She was in Cutting Class. She was in the Robert Englund Phantom of the Opera. She was in The Stepfather. We're showing 4 movies of hers, I believe just about all of those that I just named, on Saturday night, and she'll be there. And then a bunch of other movies, including Prom Night, a personal favorite of mine, on Friday night. And that's done with Exhumed Films out of Philadelphia. And they put together an amazing show. We do our best that we can with the grounds and the snack bar. They enhance that. They bring the films. They book the guests. And they have camping games, and they have a 3-legged race where Jason is chasing the 3-legged race people with a machete. The body bag race, which is like a potato sack race, but all of the garbage bags say Crystal Lake Coroner's Department on them. Just fun kind of, old summer camp games, but given a sick little twist that make them apply to the films being shown. We also have Real Weird Weekend coming up that's going to be exciting for me. We're showing Jeff Lieberman's Remote Control. Jeff Lieberman will be there. We're showing Phantom of the Paradise, Russ Meyer's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which I love, Videodrome from Cronenberg, and then the last night is my favorite. It is the Shaw Brothers' insanity of the Super Inframan with the Italian Euro spy superhero movie from the 60s called Super Argo versus Faceless Giants. Most of this means nothing to any of you. To me, this means a heck of a lot, so I'm excited about all that stuff. If you're interested, Mahoning Drive-In Theater, you can find it online, and we have a Facebook page and all that. Not really selling anything, just killing time, just telling you about fun stuff that I do. That's really all I have to talk about. Next week, there's a bunch of movies I really don't want to see, so we'll see what I'm here talking about on Monday. We have the Angry Birds movie 2. Yes, that's right. Somebody thought it was a great idea to make a second movie about a cell phone game. Then we have The Good Boys, which is a movie produced by Seth Rogen, which is about a bunch of little kids doing dirty stuff and talking dirty, which is apparently brilliant, I guess. And then, I mean that sarcastically, hey, we're going to get a movie with a bunch of old folks and they're going to cuss. Great. Let's do it with kids. Fantastic. Then we have what I actually do want to see, 47 Meters Down Uncaged. You had 47 Meters Down a couple years ago about 2 women who went into a shark cage and things went very wrong and they're trapped underwater where they can't get pulled up in a cage that can't be opened, surrounded by sharks with 1 air tank between the 2 of them. This is a movie about people who go down cave diving underwater and get trapped down there with sharks. My guess is it doesn't turn out well for all of them. Then we have also Blinded by the Light, which is a film about a Pakistani young man, I believe Pakistani, in England in the 80s who discovers Bruce Springsteen, and it just transforms his life. Then a bunch of stuff on video. So that's all from me for this week. Next week I'll be back blabbing about some other stuff. Until then, I'm Mark. I am the Cinemaniacs. Yeah, easy for you to say. Bye.